Sometimes, the most seismic shifts in an entire country's future don't begin with a riot in the streets or a thunderous declaration from a presidential podium. Sometimes they start in the quietest, most unassuming corners, a single press release issued after midnight, a hushed conference call between executives and trade representatives, a discreet transfer of funds that barely flickers across the financial news ticker before the morning headlines bury it. And sometimes the seed of a crisis grows in plain sight, camouflaged under familiar logos and patriotic slogans, until one day the realization dawns that nothing will ever be the same again. Because while most Americans were caught up in the daily swirl of election drama and market predictions, a centuries-old pillar of American agriculture quietly made a choice that could ripple through every farm, every supply chain, every kitchen table. The name is one you already know, John Deere. But the story you're about to hear is not the one you've been told. Before we peel back this layered saga of tariffs, layoffs, and corporate brinkmanship, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and tap the bell icon, because in the weeks ahead you'll want to know every new turn in this high-stakes showdown. It began with whispers out of Iowa, whispers that the tractors rolling off the assembly lines were fewer in number, that managers were meeting behind closed doors, that orders were quietly being rerouted. Then came the first confirmations. John Deere would lay off hundreds of American workers, shutter parts of 3 U.S. factories, and pour more than $55 million into a brand new manufacturing hub across the southern border. Mexico, long a low-cost alternative for American manufacturers, had become the next frontier for a brand built on the promise of American soil. At first glance, the announcement seemed almost surgical. Less than 5% of North American output, limited to small equipment lines, not the heart of the company's iconic combines and tractors. Yet for the thousands of machinists and line workers who had given decades of their lives to Deere, the symbolism was unmistakable. The great unraveling had begun. And as the news spread through Midwest towns and farm co-ops, another name stepped into the spotlight, a name that has defined the most polarizing chapters of modern trade policy, Donald Trump. With the cadence and conviction of a man ready to turn economic levers into political weapons, Trump declared that if John Deere dared to follow through with this expansion, he would impose a staggering 200% tariff on every piece of equipment they tried to bring back across the border, a threat so enormous, so unprecedented, that it rattled Deere's investors and plunged the stock price in a matter of hours. But what truly sent chills down the spines of manufacturers wasn't just the tariff itself. It was the message. If John Deere could be singled out and punished, so could any other company contemplating cost-saving moves. And in that single moment, an entire industrial strategy was thrown into chaos. Yet behind the theater of presidential threats, a deeper story was unfolding, one that reveals how desperation for profitability, surging labor costs, and the hunger for Latin American markets conspired to pull an American icon away from the land that gave it birth. For decades, John Deere has defined itself by its Made in America legacy. From the rich black soil of Illinois to the wind-swept prairies of Iowa, its factories produced the machines that helped feed not only the United States, but much of the world. But while the green and yellow paint stayed the same, the economics under the surface began to shift in ways few were willing to discuss. Since the pandemic, U.S. manufacturing wages have soared past $27 an hour, nearly 16 times higher than in emerging markets. The Great Resignation drained the skilled labor pool, forcing Deere to offer premium salaries and signing bonuses just to keep assembly lines staffed. And while American costs ballooned, competitors from Japan and India quietly expanded their reach. Just across the border, Mexico offered a stark contrast. Labor rates between $4 and $5 an hour, a rapidly modernizing logistics network, and a direct corridor for exports to Latin America, where demand for agricultural machinery is projected to explode over the next 5 years. In private, Deere executives weighed these variables not with malice, but with the cold arithmetic of survival. Either they cut costs and captured new growth, or they risked watching rivals seize the market and starve the company of future revenue. Yet, even as this calculus played out in boardrooms, no one was prepared for the ferocity of Trump's response. With a single speech, he turned John Deere's expansion plan into a litmus test for loyalty to America. Standing before a raucous crowd in Pennsylvania, he accused the company of betrayal, of abandoning its workers, of weakening the nation's agricultural backbone. The crowd roared, waving banners proclaiming, "Bring our jobs back." And in that moment, the quiet business decision in a conference room became a national flashpoint. For the workers in Iowa and Illinois, uncertainty morphed into dread. No one could say exactly how many jobs would vanish or how many months of stalled production might follow. But as shipments of mini-loaders and cab assemblies prepared to roll south, rumors grew that this was only the beginning, that the migration of production lines would eventually spread beyond small machines to the very heart of Deere's tractor business. And here's where the real question began to fester. Was this a strategic move to stay competitive, or was it the first step in abandoning the American workforce altogether? If you haven't yet subscribed, do it now, because the details you're about to hear will not only change how you see John Deere, but how you see every policy decision around tariffs and free trade. Behind the scenes, another conflict was intensifying, one even more personal to the farmers whose livelihoods hinge on Deere's equipment. For years, Deere has faced mounting criticism over its right-to-repair policies, which locked farmers out of diagnostic software and forced them to wait, sometimes weeks, for expensive authorized technicians. According to court filings and investigative reports, this monopoly on repairs wasn't incidental. It was designed. Internal documents revealed that Deere deliberately engineered systems to prevent independent servicing, optimizing service revenue at the very moments farmers could least afford delays. As the tariff threats escalated, these repair restrictions became a second front in the war. Midwestern farmers, already outraged by rising costs and long repair delays, mobilized. In Iowa and Colorado, they held rallies demanding not just protection from overseas competition, but the freedom to fix their own equipment. Legislators in more than a dozen states drafted bills forcing Deere to unlock its software and supply parts directly to farmers. In Colorado, the first such law slashed repair wait times by 30% almost overnight, fueling calls for a national right to repair mandate. But just as farmers began to feel hope, U.S. Customs officers, acting under new White House directives, began detaining Mexican-made shipments at the border. Containers packed with vital machinery sat in limbo, even as harvest deadlines loomed. The economic impact was immediate. Nebraska alone reported over $50 million in damages in a matter of weeks, and as fields sat idle for lack of equipment, the price of food threatened to spike across the country. In private, Deere executives scrambled to contain the fallout. They pledged an additional $20 billion investment in U.S. manufacturing over the next decade, a promise meant to calm fears and protect the Made in America image. But as independent audits began to circulate, questions multiplied. Was this reinvestment real, or a smokescreen to buy time? Would the company eventually shift even more production abroad if tariffs were not enforced? And in the long run, would American farms ever again be able to count on a stable supply of machinery, free from political crossfire? In the halls of Congress, the stakes were clear. Protecting American jobs meant risking higher costs, potential shortages, and trade retaliation. But opening the door to cheaper manufacturing risked sacrificing entire communities whose economies revolved around those factory jobs. Every senator and representative knew that whichever side they chose, the consequences would echo for generations. Today, as the machinery containers line up at the southern border and tractors sit motionless in Iowa fields, the question remains, who really controls the future of American agriculture? Is it a president armed with tariff threats, a corporation determined to protect profits, or the farmers whose silent work sustains an entire nation? The truth is, there may be no single answer, only the dawning realization that no industry, no matter how iconic, is immune to the forces of globalization and political brinkmanship. If you believe these stories matter, if you want to understand how the next chapter will unfold, subscribe now and join us in exposing the hidden forces reshaping our economy. And don't forget to leave a like if you think these issues deserve to be seen by more people. Because as this conflict deepens, one fact becomes undeniable. The fight over John Deere is not just about tractors. It's about the soul of American manufacturing, the resilience of family farms, and the question of whether any company can truly balance loyalty to its homeland with the demands of an unforgiving global marketplace. And yet, just when it seemed the dust might settle, another layer of complexity emerged, one that caught even seasoned analysts off guard. Beneath the surface of manufacturing strategy and tariff threats lurks a deeper disruption, one tied to data, control, and digital infrastructure. Because John Deere today is no longer just a company that makes tractors. It is a data giant, quietly amassing terabytes of real-time agricultural information from connected machines operating across the globe. Every sensor embedded in its equipment, every GPS tracker, yield monitor, soil sensor, and automated steering component streams data back to centralized servers. And this data, according to insiders, has become as valuable as the machines themselves, which leads to a question many have never considered. Who owns the harvest information collected on American farms, the farmers, or the company whose software encrypts and stores it? In the midst of a geopolitical and economic storm, the debate over data sovereignty is no longer academic. Several farming coalitions are now pushing for legislation that would grant farmers full control over the information harvested from their own fields. They argue that Deere's refusal to make data fully portable or interoperable with other platforms essentially traps customers in a closed-loop ecosystem, one where switching brands means losing years of historical data, a silent monopoly built not on steel but on algorithms. This battle, though overshadowed by the spectacle of tariffs and factory closures, may prove to be the most transformative. Because if John Deere can control not only the repair process but also the information lifeblood of modern agriculture, how much leverage does it really have? And what happens when that power is wielded not in Iowa but in Nuevo Leon? Meanwhile, murmurs of foreign influence have begun to circulate. Some former trade officials have speculated, though not yet confirmed, that the rapid expansion into Mexico might not be purely financial. Could the move have been encouraged by back-channel agreements with regional governments? Could tax incentives, regulatory leniency, or even covert infrastructure partnerships have tipped the scales behind the scenes? Mexico has made no secret of its ambitions to become a regional tech manufacturing superpower, and welcoming a brand like Deere to build an advanced assembly facility may be a critical part of that strategy. The presence of new dry ports, upgraded highways, and foreign capital flows in the Nuevo Leon corridor raises a chilling possibility. Are we watching a slow-motion industrial migration engineered not just by cost-cutting CFOs but by cross-border economic realignment? If so, the implications stretch far beyond agriculture. They raise uncomfortable questions about whether the U.S. still possesses the leverage it once had to keep its industrial champions rooted at home. If even a company as embedded in American identity as John Deere begins to globalize its operations at the expense of domestic labor, what stops others from following suit? What happens to America's manufacturing belt when one anchor after another lifts and drifts south? Already, supply chain consultants are warning that Deere's move may set a precedent for other equipment giants. Think Caterpillar, Case IH, even Boeing, who may quietly explore similar transitions if tariffs can be absorbed or circumvented through political negotiation. At the same time, internal leaks from within John Deere suggest a company in turmoil. One anonymous employee, speaking through encrypted messages, described morale as being lower than during the 2008 crisis, citing rampant confusion over job stability, rising hostility from local communities, and a sense of betrayal among lifelong staff. They're not just laying off people, the employee said. They're uprooting a legacy. That sentiment has begun to boil into public demonstrations. Across towns in Illinois and Iowa, protest signs have gone up on fences, along highways, even planted like gravestones in fields. Don't greenwash our jobs. Made in America, not in transit. Deere left us behind. And all the while, farmers continue to report equipment shortages, service delays, and rising costs. Some dealerships have started quietly reselling older, non-connected tractor models at premiums, simply because they're easier to repair and don't require proprietary software access. Black markets for diagnostic tools are also growing, with mechanics downloading cracked versions of Deere software from anonymous forums, risking lawsuits just to keep harvests on track. Is this what it has come to? Farmers becoming hackers, technicians becoming targets, entire communities becoming collateral in a war between global efficiency and local survival. But perhaps the most haunting part of this story lies in its long-term trajectory. Economists warn that the slow erosion of American industrial capacity doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it arrives as a series of reasonable-sounding decisions. A new plant here, a temporary layoff there, a tariff negotiated, a facility downsized. And then, one day, the machines don't run in Illinois anymore. The jobs aren't posted in Des Moines. The parts don't ship from Kansas. The know-how disappears. The workforce ages out, and the replacement never comes. Could that be what's happening right now? This is more than a policy debate. This is a tipping point. The numbers are stark. With over 7 million acres of farmland impacted by delays in machinery shipments and repair windows, the knock-on effects of this industrial shift are starting to accumulate. Seed deliveries missed, harvest windows narrowed, food processing plants running at half capacity, trucking routes disrupted. These aren't abstract consequences. They are hard economic costs that ripple through supply chains, elevate food prices, and destabilize rural economies already teetering from years of commodity price volatility and climate uncertainty. And then there's the question nobody wants to ask. What if the tariffs don't work? What if companies simply raise prices, absorb the penalties, or shift entire product lines to avoid them altogether? Will Trump's 200% threat actually prevent offshore expansion, or will it just become another cost of doing business, folded quietly into the sticker price of a tractor or combine? At what point do tariffs, rather than protecting jobs, simply serve as a tax on the very farmers they're supposed to help? It's easy to point fingers at the White House, at the boardroom, at international trade deals, but much harder to face the structural erosion that's been happening for decades. John Deere didn't create this system, but it is navigating it, aggressively, perhaps ruthlessly. And now every step it takes is shaping the future of not just its brand, but of American agriculture itself. Will the pressure force a reckoning inside Congress? Will a bipartisan movement emerge to defend domestic manufacturing with smarter, more strategic tools? Or will it take another full-blown crisis before action is taken? At this moment, every decision matters, every shipment delayed, every law passed or stalled, every press conference and tariff threat. It all stacks like bricks on the fragile foundation of America's agricultural independence. And if we're not careful, if we don't ask the hard questions now, we may wake up one day to realize the fields are still green. But the name painted across the machines no longer means what it used to. If this story moved you, if you believe it's time to hold power to account and protect the people who feed this country, then subscribe now, leave a like, leave a comment, share this with someone who still thinks this is just about tractors. Because it's not. It's about a crossroads between profit and patriotism, between data and dignity, between a future we control and one that gets decided in boardrooms far from home. And that decision, whether we realize it or not, is already being made.